Across America's quiet backroads and forgotten coastlines stand monuments that were never meant to be forgotten. The most expensive abandoned mansions ever built on U.S. soil. Homes larger than hotels. Estates richer than small towns. Fortunes, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars, poured into walls that now crack under the weight of their own secrets. But these ruins didn't fall because of time. They fell because of the stories the families tried desperately to bury. Tonight, we explore three of America's darkest estates, each one a monument to wealth, ambition, and tragedy. The first was called the American Versailles, a gilded palace built by a railroad dynasty whose wealth shaped entire states. Its 60-foot marble foyer still echoes with the ghost of a scandal so devastating the heirs fled overnight, leaving behind a ballroom set for a celebration that never happened. The second sits perched on a cliff overlooking a violent sea, built by a shipping tycoon whose empire collapsed under accusations so dark that even newspapers refused to print them. Rooms were sealed, workers sworn to silence. And somewhere in its west wing lies a hidden chamber investigators still debate to this day. The third mansion, an Italianate masterpiece hidden deep in a southern forest, was built by a billionaire who believed he could outrun a generational curse. For decades, the family lived lavishly, determined to ignore the tragedies that followed every heir. But when the youngest member vanished under circumstances never explained, the mansion was locked, boarded, and left to rot like a tomb. These homes didn't just fall into ruin. They were abandoned out of fear, out of shame, because finishing them, or staying in them, meant facing truths too terrible to acknowledge. Tonight, we step inside America's most expensive abandoned mansions and discover the dark histories they hide. Please subscribe to this channel and comment where you're watching from. The first mansion rises from the Pennsylvania countryside like a European fever dream transplanted onto American soil. 220 rooms spread across wings that seem to stretch endlessly in every direction. $1 million marble shipped block by block from Italian quarries. Chandeliers crafted in Vienna. A ballroom so vast it once held 500 guests, the largest in any private American home at the time. They called it the American Versailles. And for nearly 2 decades, it was the crown jewel of one of the nation's most powerful railroad dynasties, the Ashford family, whose steel rails connected coast to coast, whose political influence reached into Congress itself, whose name commanded respect in every financial capital of the world. The patriarch, Charles Ashford III, built the mansion in 1896 as a declaration. American wealth could rival, no, surpass, the old money of Europe. He hosted presidents, entertained foreign dignitaries, threw galas so extravagant that newspapers devoted entire sections to describing the gowns, the champagne, the orchestras flown in from abroad. For years, the mansion represented everything the Ashfords wanted the world to see: power, permanence, perfection. But behind the gilded doors, something darker was growing. The heir to the fortune, Charles Ashford IV, known as the young baron in society columns, had become entangled in a rivalry with another powerful family, the Sterlings, whose own wealth came from banking and steel. The details were never fully reported. Even today, historians piece together only fragments. What is known? In the winter of 1912, a confrontation occurred during a masquerade ball held in the mansion's grand ballroom. A Sterling family member, a young woman engaged to be married, was found dead at the base of the mansion's marble staircase. The official ruling was accidental, a tragic fall, but witnesses whispered of shouting, of doors locked from the inside, of young Baron Ashford vanishing into the East Wing moments before the body was discovered. Newspapers printed careful, vague accounts. The Ashfords' lawyers moved swiftly. The Sterling family accepted an undisclosed settlement and left the state. But the scandal was too large to contain. Within weeks, the Ashford family faced social exile. Invitations were quietly rescinded. Business partners distanced themselves. Political allies went silent. And then, on a cold March morning in 1913, the family fled. Not gradually. Not with announcements or auctions. They simply left. Servants arrived to find the gates locked. No instructions. No forwarding information. Inside, the mansion was frozen midlife. The ballroom remained set for the next gala, tables draped in silk, chairs arranged in perfect rows, champagne flutes waiting to be filled. Wardrobes in the master suite hung full of tailored suits and evening gowns. A breakfast table in the morning room was still set with china, as if the family had simply stepped away and never returned. And the East Wing, the section young Baron Ashford had disappeared into that terrible night, was locked, bolted from the outside. A heavy chain wrapped around the door handles. For decades, the mansion sat untouched. The Ashford fortune collapsed. Legal battles consumed what remained. The estate passed through banks, developers, preservationists, none of whom could afford the astronomical cost of maintaining it. By the 1960s, it had become what it is today, a ruin. But urban explorers who ventured inside in later years discovered something chilling. In a sealed music room on the second floor, instruments remained in perfect position, a violin on its stand, sheet music open on the piano, as if the musicians had been interrupted mid-performance and never allowed to finish. And in the East Wing, the section that had been locked for generations, a single door had been forced open. Inside, a private study, a desk, and scattered across the floor, burned fragments of letters, journals, legal documents. Someone had tried to destroy evidence. But one page survived, charred at the edges, containing only 5 words in elegant script. They will never prove what happened. The American Versailles still stands today, crumbling, overgrown, haunted by a scandal that destroyed one of America's greatest dynasties. And somewhere in its 220 rooms, the truth remains buried. If the American Versailles fell to scandal, the next mansion fell to something far darker. It stands even now, or what's left of it, on the edge of a treacherous Maine coastline, where waves crash against jagged rocks with such violence that sailors once called the stretch the graveyard. The mansion is known as Thornfield House, though locals have another name for it, the palace that watched the sea. 80 rooms carved into the cliffside. A private lighthouse. Walls of granite meant to withstand hurricanes. And beneath it all, hidden from public view, a network of underground tunnels leading to chambers no one can fully explain. It was built in 1903 by Marcus Thornfield, a shipping tycoon whose fleet dominated the Atlantic trade routes. His fortune was legendary. His influence reached into governments on 3 continents. But his family carried a curse that everyone whispered about but no one dared mention publicly. Every Thornfield heir for 3 generations had died at sea. Marcus's grandfather, lost when his ship vanished off the coast of Newfoundland. Marcus's father, drowned when a storm capsized his yacht. Marcus's older brother, swept overboard during what should have been a calm crossing. So Marcus did what any man of his wealth and paranoia would do. He built a mansion on the cliff's edge, close enough to see the ocean, far enough to defy it. A fortress where he could watch the water that had claimed his family and dare it to come for him. For years, it seemed to work. Marcus lived lavishly, entertained dignitaries, expanded his fleet. His wealth grew exponentially. But in 1911, federal auditors began investigating his shipping company. Whispers spread through financial circles. Illegal cargo, offshore shell companies, shipments that arrived with manifests that didn't match their contents. The investigation intensified. And then, abruptly, it stopped. No charges were filed. No public report issued. The auditors simply moved on. But those close to Marcus noticed changes. He stopped hosting guests, dismissed half his staff, spent hours alone in the mansion's west wing, a section of the house he had always kept locked, even from family. Workers reported hearing shouting late at night, furniture being overturned, doors slamming. One servant claimed she saw Marcus carrying something heavy, wrapped in canvas, down the private elevator that led to the underground tunnels. When she asked what it was, he fired her on the spot and had her escorted off the property by armed guards. Then, in the winter of 1913, a massive storm struck the coast. Waves taller than buildings hammered the cliffside. The mansion's foundation cracked. Engineers were called in and declared the structure unsafe, too close to the eroding cliff, too damaged to repair cost-effectively. Marcus was advised to abandon it.
And he did.
But those who knew him suspected the storm wasn't the real reason. Because the West Wing, the section he had obsessively guarded, had been sealed before the storm hit. Bricked up.
Chained.
As if he wanted to ensure no one could ever enter it again. The family never returned. Marcus died 3 years later under circumstances that were ruled natural, though his personal physician reportedly refused to sign the death certificate without significant legal pressure. For decades, Thornfield House stood empty, slowly succumbing to the sea it was built to defy. In the 1980s, urban explorers managed to break into the underground tunnels. What they found defied explanation. A private vault, its door torn open from the inside. Empty crates marked with shipping company logos, some bearing stamps from countries Marcus's fleet had never officially traded with. And in a locked desk in the West Wing, a single journal page, water-stained but legible. If they knew what I buried beneath this house, they'd tear it down stone by stone. Let the sea take it first. But the sea has been slow. Thornfield House still clings to the cliff, its rooms open to the wind, its tunnels flooding with every tide. And whatever Marcus buried there, whether literal or metaphorical, remains entombed in granite and secrecy. Some locals say the mansion will eventually collapse into the ocean. Others believe it's waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to uncover what Marcus Thornfield spent his fortune trying to hide. Have you subscribed to this channel?
Please do so.
The third mansion sits deep in a Georgia forest, hidden behind gates that haven't opened in decades. From the air, it looks like a palace lost in time. Italianate columns rising through oak trees draped in Spanish moss, sprawling verandas circling a structure the size of a luxury hotel, a marble rotunda visible through gaps in the overgrown canopy. They call it Belmont Hall, and it was built by a family that believed they could outrun fate itself. The Belmont bloodline stretched back to the 1820s, old Southern money built on cotton, timber, and eventually oil. Wealth so entrenched it survived wars, recessions, and the collapse of entire industries. But the family carried something else through the generations, a pattern of tragedies so consistent it couldn't be coincidence. Every generation, without fail, lost someone under strange circumstances. Fires that started in locked rooms. Illnesses that doctors couldn't diagnose. Disappearances that were never solved. By the 1960s, only one Belmont heir remained, William Belmont IV, a billionaire who had watched his parents, his siblings, and his cousins all fall victim to what the family quietly called the curse. William refused to accept it. He hired historians to trace the family's history, searching for a rational explanation. He consulted spiritual advisors, astrologers, even geomancers who claimed they could read the energy of land and structures. And in 1975, he made a decision. He would build a new mansion, a place so carefully designed, so precisely constructed, that it would break the pattern forever. Belmont Hall rose over the next 5 years. But it was unlike any mansion built before. The hallways didn't align with each other, intentionally. The architect, following William's instructions from spiritual consultants, created a layout meant to confuse negative energy. Doors opened into solid walls. Staircases led to ceilings. One room, labeled only as the center on blueprints, had no windows, no clear purpose, and walls painted entirely black. Entire sections of the mansion were built and then sealed before anyone could occupy them. William called them sacrificial wings, spaces meant to absorb whatever darkness followed his family. The blueprints themselves were incomplete. Pages labeled Wing D were missing entirely, though the structure clearly had 4 wings. Workers whispered about the project. Some refused to return after seeing the bizarre architectural choices. Others claimed they heard voices in unfinished rooms, felt watched in empty corridors. But William was convinced his plan would work. In 1980, the family moved in. For nearly a decade, nothing happened. The curse, it seemed, had been broken. William married, had children, hosted gatherings where he would proudly explain his mansion's unusual design, how every strange detail was intentional, a ward against the tragedies that had haunted his family for generations. But in 1989, his youngest nephew, a boy of 12, vanished while exploring the mansion's upper floors. Search teams combed every room. Police brought in dogs. Investigators mapped the entire structure. The boy was never found. But in his bedroom, they discovered a notebook filled with sketches, drawings of doors, staircases, hallways, and on the final page, a detailed sketch of a hidden staircase descending into darkness, with a single word written beneath it: down. No such staircase appeared on any blueprint. Architects insisted it didn't exist. But the family knew better. Within a month, William ordered the mansion sealed. No auction, no sale, no public explanation. The gates were locked. Guards were hired to keep people away. The family never spoke of Belmont Hall again. In 2018, urban explorers discovered an entrance to a sub-basement, a level not documented in any official record. Inside, they found a room with children's toys scattered across the floor, a single rocking chair facing a wall, and painted directly onto the stone, a mural of a staircase descending into darkness. The same image from the missing boy's notebook. But the staircase in the mural led nowhere. Just paint on a wall. Or so they thought until they noticed something. The wall was newer than the rest of the basement. Recently bricked. Sealed from the other side. Whatever lies beyond that wall remains a mystery. William Belmont died in 2003, taking his secrets with him. And Belmont Hall, the mansion built to break a curse, stands empty, waiting in the Georgia forest, proving that some legacies are impossible to escape, no matter how much you spend trying. 3 mansions, 3 fortunes, 3 families destroyed. But step back, and a pattern emerges, something that connects these estates beyond their abandonment, beyond their wealth, beyond even their tragedies. They all share the same architectural scars. Sealed rooms. In every mansion, entire wings or chambers were deliberately bricked up, locked, chained, not because of structural damage, but because of something the families couldn't bear to acknowledge. The American Versailles, the East Wing, locked after the masquerade ball scandal. Thornfield House, the West Wing, sealed before the storm even struck. Belmont Hall, Wing D, missing from blueprints entirely, and the sub-basement wall bricked from the inside. These weren't just rooms. They were tombs for secrets. Sudden abandonment. In every case, the families fled overnight. No gradual decline. No estate sales or public auctions. They simply walked away, leaving behind furniture, clothing, entire lives frozen mid-motion. As if staying one more night was impossible. As if the houses themselves had become uninhabitable, not because of damage, but because of memory. Blueprint anomalies. Missing pages. Undocumented floors. Rooms that don't appear on official plans but exist in the physical structure. In all 3 estates, the architecture itself seems designed to hide something. To create spaces that exist off the record. Chambers that were built and then erased from history. And finally, the thread that ties them all together, legacy fear. These families didn't just abandon their homes. They abandoned their names. The Ashfords dissolved their railroad empire, sold off holdings, and scattered. The Thornfields liquidated their shipping company and disappeared from public records. The Belmonts became reclusive, refusing interviews, avoiding any mention of the mansion or the family's past. It's as if wealth, power, and status meant nothing once the darkness inside these walls became too much to bear. Because here's the truth about these mansions. They were never really homes. They were monuments to ambition, declarations that wealth could buy permanence, that power could defeat fate, that legacy could be controlled. But ambition without limits becomes obsession. And obsession, when mixed with tragedy, creates something far more dangerous than ghosts. It creates silence. The kind of silence that seals rooms. The kind of silence that burns letters. The kind of silence that walks away from hundreds of millions of dollars rather than face what was built. So what happens to a legacy when the home meant to preserve it becomes too dangerous to return to? It rots. Just like the mansions themselves. These estates still stand. The American Versailles with its ballroom frozen in time, Thornfield House clinging to its eroding cliff, Belmont Hall waiting in the Georgia forest. And they will stand for decades more, slowly crumbling, slowly releasing their secrets to the wind and rain and vines that reclaim them. Because some truths are too expensive to preserve. Some histories are too dark to inherit. And some mansions were always meant to be abandoned. Today, if you know where to look, you can still find them. Forgotten coordinates. Rusted gates. Overgrown driveways leading to palaces the world was meant to forget. And if you're brave enough to step inside, past the warnings, past the decay, past the weight of all that silence, you'll discover something far more unsettling than empty rooms. You'll discover that these mansions still feel occupied, not by the living, but by the secrets that were too terrible to take with them. And those secrets? They're still waiting for someone to finally uncover what America's wealthiest families spent fortunes trying to bury. Please subscribe to this channel and comment where you are watching from. See you in our next video.